European time. I know that we've got our speakers around the globe and certainly plenty of our participants. But I'd like to welcome you to our KAICIID webinar on Youth in Action, Building Peace and Moving Dialogue Online. Our speakers today are representatives of the World Organization of the Scout Movement, Arigato International, Search for Common Ground, and the charity organization Freedom to Learn. We're really pleased that many of you are joining us today for this webinar and to join the discussion how youth is responding to COVID-19, their online dialogues and initiatives to continue their efforts to build peace. My name is Elizabeth Perks and I'm Program Manager on the Dialogue Knowledge Hub. And I am your moderator for today. So before we start, I'd like to give you a few reminders of our house rules. First of all, you are being recorded and we will be publishing this webinar on the Dialogue Knowledge Hub platform. So if you need to leave early, need to revisit a section, you will certainly be able to go and take another look at the webinar on the page. I'd like to invite you to introduce yourself via the group chat function. For example, stating your name and from where you're from or which community you work in and the part of the world you're sitting at right now. So the presentations will be followed by a question and answer, and we'll gather those questions if you could write in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you'd like to ask a question, type it in and send it to us. If you'd like to direct it to a specific speaker, please indicate as such. I'd like to remind that currently the online resources all over the world are being heavily used, and I apologize right now if we do have some technical occurrences, and we will try our best to deal with those. So a very warm welcome to our guest speakers, Mark Owen, Saji, Ross Tutin, and Nyambura Gichuki. Mark Owen is the founder and trustee of the UK charity Freedom to Learn, providing the opportunity of education to children from some of the remotest regions of the Himalayas and South Asia. He's also Secretary General for the European Council of Religious Leaders and Director of the Centre of Religion, Reconciliation and Peace at the University of Winchester. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Saji Preles is the Director of Children and Youth Programs at Search for Common Ground and co-chair of the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security, working with youth movements and youth-focused organizations in conflict and transition environments. Welcome, Saji. Ross Tutin is a scout from Brisbane in Australia. He's unit leader of the spiritual development and global consultant for the World Organization of the Scout Movement, leading and advising program teams to improve the spiritual development program. Welcome, Ross.
Thank you.
Nyambura Gichuki is programs officer of the End Child Poverty programs at Arigato International, developing leadership capacity of young people and engaging in interfaith cooperation and promoting dialogue for the advancement of peace and sustainable development. Welcome, Nyambura.
Thank you so much.
So we'd like to start with the first presentation, and I hand the floor to Mark. Thank you very much. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Liz. So I've got a short presentation for you. I just did try sharing my screen with mixed results just a minute ago, but hopefully it will work this time. So just give me 1 second, please. Right. Can everybody see? Everybody, can you see the presentation now?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. It's on the wrong slide, but I'll just go back to the beginning. So yeah, thank you very much for offering me this opportunity to say something about the charity. I think I'm probably the presentation perhaps that's least obviously connected with the theme of the webinar, but I'll try and kind of relate what we're doing at the moment, our work as part of the charity, and obviously how the situation with COVID, etc., has impacted on our ongoing work in Nepal and education and development programs. So, yeah, the charity I played a hand in starting is called Freedom to Learn. It's a UK registered charity, so been registered in the UK since. I should have checked this beforehand, but I think it's 2005. And the idea around the charity is, as the title implies, really, the name of the charity, it's about giving the opportunity of education for every child. So we initially started working in the kind of early 2000s in the remotest parts of India. So up in the Himalayan regions, in places like Laul, Spiti, for those of you who know Nepal, Zanskar. So these are very remote valleys. Up in the Himalayan region, the people are often culturally and religiously Tibetan Buddhist, although there is that kind of synthesis, a mix of religions in those areas with influences of Hinduism and kind of even Islam in some parts of Zanskar and the higher regions. So the charity initially formed partnerships with several schools who were either trying to build schools up in these higher regions with mixed success. Even if you built a school up in these higher valleys, it was often difficult to get good teachers to go to them or provide good quality education because of the environment, weather conditions. So actually what we ended up doing was working quite a lot with charities and partners in India that were bringing the children down to the lower foothills of the Himalayas to purpose-built schools to educate the children. But at the same time, what was very important to us from the beginning was that they were trying to maintain those kind of religious, cultural heritage and roots. So Tibetan was still taught, their indigenous languages, religions, cultures were still maintained, even though the children were being moved out of the areas of their birth. They were obviously still going back and forth. But at that time, particularly when we first started, it was quite a long journey. So children would often come down for 6, 7, 8, even 8 or 9 months of the year without seeing their parents or other members of their family, to live in these schools, be educated. So it was really important to maintain that kind of religious and cultural roots. So that was how the charity first began. And then we got an invitation to go and start working in Nepal. So this was around about 2013. I was doing some work there anyway in my professional life as part of the post-conflict peace building and reconciliation work in Nepal, and also the charity got invited to go and do some work there. And actually since around about 2015, most of our work has now moved to Nepal. So I saw on the chat at least one person is from Nepal, so they can, who are watching the webinar. So if I get anything wrong, please feel free to interject and pick me up. But I think the current population of Nepal is nearly 30 million. These are kind of official statistics, although I'm sure they can be challenged. Over 100 different ethnic groups, caste groupings, so kind of religious, inter-religious, intra-religious, different ethnic and caste groupings in Nepal. Over 92 different languages. Again, these figures can be challenged because different variations and different dialects on languages. Around 80% Hindu though in Nepal, and 10% Buddhist thereabouts, and smaller minorities of Muslims, 4.2% in this particular figure, Karant, and other religions. And of course there's large swathes of ethnic groups and people who would have traditionally been categorized as kind of indigenous or ethnic groupings or caste groupings. So Nepal underwent, as probably many of you know, a civil war for 10 years from 1996 to 2006. And sorry, this presentation is from a different 10 years ago, marked the end of the civil war. Is obviously longer than that now. 14 years ago marked the end of the civil war in Nepal. And since then, again, as probably many of you know, it's been a very turbulent time in Nepal. There's been various different governments. The political situation is volatile, to say the least. And of course, this impacts heavily on all the services that a normal, stable government would deliver, including the quality and access to education for young people. So as a charity in Nepal, what we do is try and expand exactly that access to and quality education for young people, particularly from traditionally disadvantaged groups or socio-economically disadvantaged groups. So the kind of method we use of doing this is really all about dialogue. I mean, we came to learn very early on from our work as a charity. There's a lot of really good work being done in international development in terms of education. There's a lot of education development work that's not quite so good. And I think one of the things we really wanted to do was make sure the quality of our work obviously was as best as possible. And our plan really was, or our thoughts were, the only way we can do that is obviously if that development is community led. And I know this is a kind of buzzword and phrase that's used a lot these days in international development, but more importantly, or at least equally important, is that it was youth led. So very much our approach to working with schools in international development is to begin a dialogue. And that's the most important part, is that our work begins with a dialogue in the schools between all the key stakeholders, driven or very much led by the young people themselves. So we work often with young people to increase their skills in kind of communication, confidence, dialogue, problem solving skills, those types of issues, and to think really strategically and structurally about the problems within their schools, within their communities for access and quality education. And then we try and support the young people in leading a dialogue between teachers, parents, employers. Often a lot of these young people are kind of working as domestic labourers, local authorities, education. And that's always the kind of foundation of our work when we start working in any area or school, is to begin that dialogue process and really to support the young people in articulating from their perspective their barriers to education, the problems they face, whether that be in terms of travel, in terms of turbulent home lives, in terms of kind of resources, in terms of time to do homework, etc. So to begin that dialogue amongst the community, because what we found out very early on is you can come in, you can support perhaps better quality teachers or even better quality environments and classrooms, but unless those initiatives are really led by the young people and the communities, they're not sustainable interventions. Well, basically it just creates a culture of dependency. So very much we try and support communities and young people to come up with their own sustainable interventions, and then bring in local organisations, work with local organisations to implement the kind of the solutions to the problems they've identified, or create better relationships or dialogues within those communities. Again, our emphasis is always on that kind of religious cultural relevance of education development solutions. Too often we see international organizations or actors or people come in and implement solutions that obviously work in their own context, or are kind of generic solutions to education or international development. And even today, even though the emphasis is always on our solutions should be community-led and culturally relevant, because of restraints often of organisations, whether that be strategic priorities or funders, etc., they're not really rooted in the cultural and religious context as they should be. So that's something we place a great emphasis on, and wherever we're trying to get funding, we're very open about that. That is one of our main aims, and that we don't want to deviate from that despite kind of restrictions or requirements. The inter-religious, inter-caste dimensions integral to peace building and community cohesion. So a lot of our work is in schools where they are traditionally excluded castes or groupings or ethnic religious groupings. And certainly a very important part of our work is that kind of interreligious, inter-caste, inter-ethnic relationship building, supporting dialogue between different groups. Often the way communities are divided in Nepal, and therefore opportunities and access to education is around different caste, religious and ethnic groupings, and that's something we always try and understand and address. So just to summarize, I think obviously we are thinking about moving work online. The impact that COVID-19's had on our work has resulted in some really difficult choices. I mean, for those of you who live in these countries who are experiencing this, you've got much better knowledge than me, but certainly from our program managers and project managers, the lockdown in Nepal has had, obviously, on one hand, it's been seen as a positive move to stop the spread of coronavirus, but of course there's huge impact on education, employment, livelihoods, etc. And people are having to make really difficult decisions. We have moved some of our education online. We also do a sister schools project where some of our schools in Nepal link up with schools in the UK through online kind of chats, dialogues, conversations, sharing of knowledge with young people here. So we can continue that. In Nepal, obviously, the internet, not necessarily the access to the internet, is not as good as we are fortunate enough to experience here. So we can't just simply move everything online. So we are trying to support teachers to do some online training, but they're also putting packs together to deliver to households. And, you know, just to ensure that young people are continuing to get some sort of education, because certainly in the most vulnerable communities, the real danger of something like COVID and lockdown and shutdown of schools is that the most vulnerable children that we've worked really hard to get into school and education, despite the competing pressures of parents wanting them to work, or you know, not wanting girls particularly to go to school above a certain age. Now the schools are closed. If they stop going, then it's a real danger that they'll never come back to school. So that's something that we're trying to keep on going, that communication with all the pupils that we support and sponsor, and to ensure that when the time comes and schools open, that children do get the opportunity to go back to school again, get a decent education, which obviously enhances their prospects throughout their life. So that's me. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you for those amazing insights into this fabulous work that you're doing out there in the Himalayas and Nepal. To hear about, you know, the youth leading those sustainable interventions and how you're coping with these very, very difficult times. And yeah, for me, just to imagine how and those choices. Thank you very, very much. To the participants, please go ahead. If you have any questions, pop it in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. If you have something directly for Mark, maybe in the meantime he can be answering those questions as they come up, or some we can bring into the Q&A at the end. And now I would like to hand over to Sachi Prelis to give us his presentation. Thank you, Sachi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me? Yes, great. First of all, thanks to KAICIID for hosting this, and thanks for inviting me to be part of this amazing group of panelists that I'm sharing this virtual space with. Also want to thank all the participants who are coming all the way from Sri Lanka to Australia to Kenya and Uganda and others. So it's a huge pleasure and a privilege to be joining you virtually on this day. My presentation, building on Mark's, I think is going to focus a little around the role of young people affected by armed conflict and violence, and how they are adopting some of the programs in times of COVID, and then share some ways that others who are interested can also be involved in at a global level around shaping the role of policy and practice around conflict and peace. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides to share with you and look forward to the conversation afterwards as well. Just to put things into perspective, this is probably a no-brainer for you, but when you look at the world right now, in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, the age is in the teens, the median age in a lot of countries. In Africa, Asia, Middle East. So the percentage of young people in the world is significant right now. And we see that 1 in every 4 young people today between the age of 15 and 29 are affected by violent conflict itself. 77% of the young people who are working in informal jobs, which means that the ability for them to gain employment in a time of conflict is limited, but in a time of COVID pandemic, it's even further polarized and more difficult to have. Something that we are seeing and hearing, and we've known for many years, is the idea of how that so many people today are hungry. While we deal with the pandemic called COVID-19, there's a hunger pandemic also brewing, and up to 1 billion people could be actually starving because of this as well. And we've seen, for example, 23 countries, because of COVID, have suspended measles vaccines for children, which means about 80 million children now are at risk because they don't have access to basic healthcare as well. So especially in settings of conflict and violence, the Western model of physical distancing, working online sometimes can be very difficult to manage and very challenging. I just wanted to kind of portray that picture a little more on the idea of physical distancing or social distancing. I'll say physical distancing itself. When you look at places like Niger, one of the youngest countries in the world, this is in a village. It's very difficult to think of social distancing or physical distancing when everyone is packed in and living very close to one another. And some of the countries that have the youngest populations, the median age-wise in Niger, Mali, Uganda, Angola, Zambia, you're looking at the median age being in the teens. And that means these countries are significantly young. So understanding this young population is really important to make sure that they have those on-ramps to engagement without being excluded. And fully endorsing Mark's idea of young people being part of the solution, being part of the design of programs is critical, but oftentimes they don't have those choices or opportunities. So in conflict settings for many years, the idea that young people have the predominant idea at a policy level has been that young people are either a burden to a country or are troublemakers in a country. And for many years, that was the prevailing method of policy shaping and practice. We forgot that a vast majority of young people are not committing violence. And we only focus on a small group of people who created trouble and put lots of money and resources and attention with that lens in mind. But in 2010 onwards, that started to shift. So I'll talk very briefly about the role young people played before COVID happened, how they were shaping policy itself. And it's pretty significant because oftentimes, young people's roles in policy shaping is very limited. So I think it's important to take a moment to recognize, for example, the resolutions at the Security Council, one of the most powerful and sometimes the most controversial bodies in the world when it comes to peace and security. The Security Council itself, for many years, didn't consider peace and security and youth as critical issues. But because of young people from over 109 countries, over 11,000 of them were saying we are sick and tired of being seen as troublemakers and victims only, when vast majority of us are actually building peace in our communities. We are preventing violence in our communities. We are actually helping with humanitarian assistance. We don't get recognized for our agency, and we are not seen as partners. And that 11,000 young people were advocating on a daily basis to bring the agenda to the Security Council. Security Council members start to listen to that. And that created an opportunity for this first Security Council Resolution 2250 to be adopted on December 2015. That's the very first time a policy shaping body legally recognize the positive contributions young people play in conflict-affected settings, and by encouraging and mandating governments to shape young people's issues as seeing them as partners. The second resolution was followed in 2018 by the Security Council, and it was further recognizing the role of young people as political actors, and that political agency needs to be recognized and empowers governments to engage them as partners also. All this coming from the Security Council, but the impetus didn't come from the Security Council. It came from young people who were advocating for this for many generations and many years. And it was only in the recent years that that recognition was being put into law and into policy. So those two resolutions are important for, especially for conflict-affected settings, because it changes how young people can be seen and engaged. The second resolution, 2419, especially talked about the role of young people in peace processes also. These are places where there's an active peace process ongoing, whether it's a ceasefire agreement, a dialogue process, reconciliation process, or a formal negotiation to end armed conflict. And whether it's in Syria and Yemen right now, or South Sudan. So the second resolution talked about the role young people play in that process. And based on that, there's been a push to gain political leverage to recognize the role young people are playing. In this picture, for example, you see ministers from Qatar, Colombia, Finland, and the UN. But you also see them flanked with two young people, one from Afghanistan on the far left, and on the far right, a young woman from Liberia. But in the center of it is a young woman from Sri Lanka who was the second envoy, UN Secretary General's envoy on youth, who is facilitating this conversation around the role of young people in peace processes. And while policy is important, it's the framing and branding is also important. And these kinds of events, when they occur before COVID, it was important to make sure that these are issues that relate to and impact young people cannot be discussed without young people at the table and seen as equal partners. So this was an event that launched a whole series of activities, including a research paper called We Are Here, and integrated approaches to youth inclusion in peace processes, that articulated how young people across the world are shaping peace processes itself. Because the general concept in these spaces is that peace processes are negotiated by men with power and men with guns. But oftentimes the role young people play and actions that they have are not recognized as contributing to a peace process. But the model that has been created gives mediators, UN actors, and others a way to think of how young people can be supported. And I'll share the resources we can share later in the presentation as well. Moving from that, I wanted to kind of, because the role of young people in policy shaping has been significant, but their impact has also been curtailed now because of COVID. And I want to share three examples with you to spur some thinking and conversation later on of how young people are adapting in times of COVID as well. And one example is in Cameroon, where communities where there is no running water, sometimes very limited running water. So the physical distancing is also very difficult. But young people who are part of the mediation efforts in Cameroon are now actually shifting their work to make sure, before the pandemic started to come into Cameroon, they were starting to socialize how prevention can happen, how to mitigate the spread of the virus in the country. And what they did was target their peers, targeted religious actors, and targeted government members. The first picture on the far left is that they had a hand sanitizer campaign because there's no running water. So they were able to create hand sanitizers with everyday products, and then get the religious community to be behind that, to share this in their churches, for example. So this is a picture of one of the religious leaders coming to the youth organization's office to help put the hand sanitizers together and then talk about it in the church. The top right-hand picture you will see is how these youth groups have brought other young people together and are working in partnership with governments. And this is important because one of the crises that we will see beyond the pandemic is an increasing lack of trust between young people and the state, because the states have failed to respond to the crisis properly. And here, seeing that coming, this is how young people are working with young parliamentarians, coming together and saying, how do we actually minimize the risk and make sure that people are safe. So parliamentarians are taken to far away villages outside the capital. In the bottom picture, you see a minister for justice on the left, along with community members where there's no electricity. They're giving people, making people aware of how to mitigate and prevent the spread of the virus when it comes to the villages itself, and talking about how to keep your hands sanitized and keep the distances that are required to make sure that everyone is saving each other's lives. And this was done by young people working with governments, religious actors, to make sure this is happening, where internet is not the norm, where running water or electricity is not the norm. This is important. And this village, for example, is not far from the borders to where there is terrorist activities taking place also. So this is where one of the key activities in Cameroon that is happening, that is working in partnership with governments. Shifting from Cameroon to South Sudan, for example, the far left-hand side before COVID, these are 3 young adolescents, the ages ranging from 16 through 18-year-olds, who were part of a radio program. These are youth-led, adolescent-led radio programs talking about issues that can matter to young South Sudanese in the country. South Sudan's youth population below the age of 30 is about 72% of the population is below the age of 30. So here are young people on the radio on a weekly basis talking about issues that matter to them, whether it's on peace process, whether it's on governance reform, whether it's on sexual gender-based violence issues and others. And what they have had to do was shift to an online platform now, from a radio to start using WhatsApp and other mechanisms to actually continue to tell their stories and have their radio programs. One of the young boys, he's 17 years old. He especially talks about how COVID needs to be recognized, how people who are trying to prevent COVID virus from spreading needs to consider young people who have disabilities, for example, a population that oftentimes gets further marginalized when it comes to response mechanisms. So he talks about this on his WhatsApp groups and on the radio now still, because he records messages, sends it to our radio program, and we rebroadcast it and use it on Facebook as well. So they're shifting from a traditional radio to online broadcasting still, but still making sure there's prevention messages, there's collective messages to manage fear of the unknown, and all this is done by young people itself. Just 3 days ago, a young women's organization in South Sudan, also created a hotline, got the UN saying we need a hotline, we need funding to support this, and convinced the UN Population Fund to support creating a hotline to prevent sexual gender-based violence happening, and for survivors of sexual gender-based violence to call in to get services. And because there's no physical office, people had numbers of folks, and they say one number can be then connected to others who can be online to talk to young girls and young women about these issues, and sometimes young men as well, and how they can actually be champions to prevent sexual gender-based violence, especially when there is people living in close quarters. How do you make sure that violence doesn't impact all of us itself? So it's not just about the virus, but it's also about violence as well. That's in a nutshell from South Sudan. Moving to Sri Lanka, I know several of you, there are a couple of you from Sri Lanka joining as well. Very briefly, again, large groups of people, especially in Colombo, in the capital itself, are living on a daily wage. They're surviving on what they make every day, and they're feeding families because of that. And a group of young people came together working with the military, because this is a time that there was a curfew imposed across the country. So people's movement was limited. when that movement was limited, people couldn't go to work. People couldn't earn a living. And what these young people came together and did was they said, how do we target the most marginalized communities and ensure that when they don't have money to feed themselves, how do we actually support them in that process? In a 2-week period, they were able to identify 5,000 families and actually make sure that there was rations for them, rice and lentil and all that, the basic necessities for purchase for them that they can survive for at least a month. And that was done in partnership with the military and the police. Oftentimes, two groups that young people sometimes in conflict settings don't see eye to eye on. Police see young people as not trustworthy and troublemakers, and young people see police as the troublemakers. And here's an example where they were collaborating to deal with a common problem that they both saw of people being hungry. Shifting to the last picture on the right, for example, this is in Sri Lanka, a holy holiday called Vesak. Vesak is a traditional holiday in Sri Lanka and across Southeast Asia where Buddhists celebrate the birth of the enlightenment of Buddha. And again, the same family members who couldn't earn a living, they were able to create a partnership with an Uber light company called Pygmy to make sure that they are actually providing opportunities for these daily wagers to make lanterns. And these lanterns were sold, but people couldn't sell. So it was using an online platform with the drivers to deliver lanterns to people who purchased them and trying to find creative mechanisms to make sure that people don't go starving. People still can earn a living and making sure that common humanity was enshrined. The guiding principle in this idea was that if some groups of people in the community are suffering, we all suffer. And because of that, we need to make sure that everyone is safe and everyone is healthy. So that kind of sparked this idea of young people coming together and organize to feed and take care of people who are the most vulnerable and make sure there's opportunities for them to make a living as well. And I wanted to close with a few resources that I can share this PowerPoint with you with these resources that are linked. There's information about the UN Security Council resolutions, there's practice information, and there's Facebook groups that people can join. But I close with this. The work at the policy level before the pandemic was critical. The work after the pandemic is even more critical, that young people are seen and engaged as partners and not seen as a threat. And when I say young people, I mean the young people who are in the informal sector, as well as young people who are working in schools and out of schools, making sure that young people who are part of NGOs are all part of the solution, and governments need to engage them as partners. And I think that's the spirit and intent of this. I co-chair the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security, which is comprised of United Nations actors, youth-led groups, international NGOs, African Union, European Union, IGAD, SADC, and other regional organizations coming together to shape policy around young people as partners. And if anyone is interested in being part of this and learning more about this, I'd love to get your information and connect you to a lot of these processes that are happening so that we make sure that we are collaborating across all these divides. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak, and I look forward to the conversation following.
Thank you very much, Saji. Thank you for drawing us the focus, showing us this significant shift of youth in policy making, these very moving initiatives going on. Really, thank you very, very much. I'm sure we're going to have plenty of Q&As coming in. Just a little reminder, as I've seen that we've had some participants join in the meantime. At the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A. If you have any questions for the panelists, please pop them in there. And also in the chat bar, we'd love to hear about you, where you're from, what's your name, a little bit of information about yourselves, and we'll be taking a little look in there. In the meantime, we move on to the next presentation, and I invite Ross now to take the floor. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you very much. Let me just set up my screen for some sharing. And I hope everybody can see that very well. But g'day from Australia. My name's Ross Tewson. I'm from Scouts Australia, but I'm also doing some volunteer work for the World Organisation of the Scout Movement. And this is my presentation this evening regarding Scouts in action during this time of COVID-19 and how we continue to build peace, but also not only in the practical sense, but also moving to the online world and moving that dialogue that we do as part of our educational program to our youth members. We have 50 million members throughout the world from 171 countries. And this is one of the typical activities that you would see Scouts doing outdoors, in nature, having a non-formal education program that learns about leadership and citizenship, talking at teamwork, looking at the physical, the social, the emotional, the character, educational components of young people for them to create a better world. And however, we've now at a stage with COVID lockdowns. We've been unable to continue a program that we normally participate in, and which is a shame, because most of our work is definitely outdoors. It's definitely with the community, and an important part of our program is the spiritual development aspect of our program, which looks at interreligious dialogue at different cultures and different intergenerations and different interreligious and interfaith groups in order to promote peace and harmony throughout the world. So you would see that we're unable to do the physical work that we do. And this particular picture was from our World Scout Jamboree that happened in North America in July last year. But we've now changed scope, and our scope has definitely taken one of two different tracks. In a number of developing countries, Scouting has actually had to gone into a more of an emergency situation where local Scouts, particularly of the older age group, is currently helping local communities, local villages, local people in order to work through the disaster of the pandemic at the moment, particularly when there is the need for emergency food, understanding of the situation in terms of hand sanitizing, washing hands, lack of movement, and people being stuck at home and unable to get the necessities of life in order for them to continue living. So this is a photo of some Scouts in Kuwait. Where they are undertaking the emergency packages for families who are needing such assistance. So we've got aspects of Scouts that are able to sort of pivot from their normal program and go into that sort of, general support, because in some countries, particularly where youth make up the majority of the population, it is wonderful to see them being active and being part of the social fabric in order to help people in this pandemic, particularly with people who are vulnerable in terms of lack of income. Therefore, they are unable to buy food, get clothing, have shelter. So the number of countries, particularly in Asia, particularly in the Middle East and Africa, and even in South America, has provided that Scouts are working on an emergency footing to help local communities continue to survive within the lockdown restrictions of a pandemic. So those sorts of opportunities does help in providing and building peace, particularly through dialogue. There's that personal interaction, and that interaction of people, regardless of where they come from, who they are, their background, their social status, in order for people to actually have that opportunity to continue and sort of live through what they need to in the pandemic. But there's also the other pivot side, that our educational program still has to continue. And this is a photo of a group of American Boy Scouts of America speaking through Zoom on to some Scouts in Afghanistan. And Afghanistan was one of our recently newly created Scouting members, officially inducted into the World Organization of the Scout Movement. But the opportunity of with people, particularly in the Western countries where the lockdown is very severe in certain cases, and the education has stopped, not only in the formal sense, but also in the gathering of scouts and the non-formal education. Scouting is continuing dynamically at home. And one of those ways of moving that dialogue and moving our educational program online is through the mediums such as we're using now, through Zoom and other platforms, to actually meet, to not only continue the relationships we have with our scouting friends from our local scout group and from our local area, but also being able to connect safely to other scouts throughout the world, and actually learning about different cultures and different languages and different skills and different opportunities. And so this example of the Boy Scouts of America group, talking to particularly Girl Scouts in Afghanistan and actually learning about life in the two different cultures. And that actually brings up a good point, that the opportunity of dialogue that we have through our spiritual development program is alive and well through moving that, pivoting from doing that, connectedness through our activities face to face, to then move it online and using these mediums like Zoom to actually continue that opportunity. And we did that very quickly, not long after a number of countries have started the lockdown. And we have an annual event with Scouting called Jamboree on the Internet every October. But we thought that with the lockdown and all the Scouts stuck at home, and this is a unique situation for Scouts where we have not had this situation as much. Yes, we've had wars in the past where they would have shut down countries and cultures and community life, but it hasn't happened of recent time for this current generation. So how do we interact and how do we participate of the Scouting program on an online means? And so WOSM, the World Organization of the Scout Movement, decided that it was one of our program ideas was to bring in a special edition of our Jamboree on the internet, so we can all gather online through various programs, through various Zoom meetings, through various guest speakers, and the opportunity for connection to people that are connected with Scouts, particularly when you look at the people that you see on the screen. So Bear Grylls is our Chief Ambassador for World Scouting. That is a big opportunity to speak to as somebody who has been a Scout and has followed a lot of Scouting opportunities and ways, and actually make that connection to young people throughout the world. And as such, we were able to use this as an opportunity to promote dialogue and to promote peace, and the opportunity of actually sharing religious and interfaith and intercultural dialogue through these Zoom opportunities allowed us to expand our program, our world program on spiritual development and on dialogue for peace, into a forum that was able to be regarded by all members connected through an online medium. Because at the end of the day, instead of being in the outdoors, we are now in the great indoors, and being only temporarily in the great indoors allows us to have a check to see how we are understanding our educational program and how we're able to bring dialogue and to bring peace and harmony through that education program. Scouts UK, which I've borrowed this slide, this particular pictorial, is promoting Scouting programs for their members through this meeting of the great indoors. And so you have been seeing a lot of pictures on our Scout social media of tents being built in the living room or in the backyard if there was space, and or in the kitchen, and sort of using different ideas and different tools to connect with your Scouting program of traditional camping and connection, but also the fact of using different quirky ideas. Like they wanted all the members to hike to the moon. Well, you can't hike to the moon, but why don't everybody sort of do their hiking around the house or inside or upstairs and downstairs, and do a number of times, log those number of steps and number of kilometers or meters that you've done, total it all up from all the members of the United Kingdom, and see whether you would make the distance from Earth to the moon. So that type of quirky understanding of a different program angle to keep young people interested and to keep them interactive and to keep them in tune with the educational methods of our movement was a very important thing. Because in Australia, we've had to, on a local front, had to really bring our whole program to scouting at home. So the reality was that our local scout leaders in Australia had to use mediums like Zoom to undertake their normal weekly program, and had to relook at their program in order to present it in a way that was online. But at the same time, not only presenting that, and whether that be mediums of opportunities of cooking and interactions and talking and building the fire that is not this, not a real fire inside the house, but an opportunity of building something that would look like that, but also the fact of dialogue between other scout groups, because normally they don't have the connections very regularly, but this has now changed how we as scouts are able to have dialogue for not only within our and around our local community, but also outside the community as well. Because as one of our main pillars of our educational program is spiritual development. So we're looking at how youth are developing their spirituality and how they're developing their beliefs in their religion, and also understanding the world and faiths and religions around them, and then the spiritual beliefs that other people have, because it's that personal connection of not only your personal spiritual journey, but respecting the spiritual journey and spiritual beliefs of others is an important and key role of spiritual development, where you would actually have people to have our scouts to understand that, to promote wider peace and harmony, which is an important aspect of why the scouting program has been very successful for over 110 years. It's that connection of a brother and sisterhood in the movement, that we accept a lot of people from different backgrounds, different religions and faiths, different cultures, different socio-economic backgrounds, high, low, middle, and skin color and the like. So this importance is still relevant for a program of building peace and moving our program online. As an example of that, in Australia, we have tuned our spiritual development program as one example of how we've improved our educational program on spiritual development in Australia. And we use the concept of the compass. Now, scouts are famous of being outdoors. They should know how to use a map and a compass to guide and direct them from A to B. And so in a spiritual sense, you are having an internal compass that is guiding you through your journey in life. And we were using the 4 points of the compass to provide 4 important aspects of spirituality and spiritual development. And so we've outlined that as a tangible way of youth members to understand what that is and what that journey is. And you can then process to actually take this out in not only your local community, but also bringing that on the online sense as well. So we are asking our scouts to explore beliefs and what they are around the world and in the community around them. That respecting of other people has always been a key element of our scouting educational program, and that is able to be translated not only online, but also in the local community, to respect people even outside of our scouting spheres of influence in order to create peace and harmony. That stopping for reflection is always an important part, so you can have time to process what your day, what your opportunities, what your encounter is, and also having the opportunity of being thankful, because particularly in some countries that are very locked down, it's been very hard and difficult to continue living and taking out an existence, whereas in some other countries, particularly here in Australia, there has been still some an element of movement being available. So we have been thankful in some of the restrictions in allowing us to continue our program through an online basis. that is safe through our Safe from Harm, and so making sure that youth members are safe and undertaking the activities online in a safe manner, supervised by adults, but also learning about the opportunities of what would happen to be safe and be able to undertake their program safely. Because we want to progress after COVID, how we can continue to bring not only the online world back to our physical world, but have the two work together in harmony. And so then we can, using this photo from the World Scout Jamboree last year, the connection of people learning about other faiths and other cultures. And so the opportunity, and I'm just looking at the scarf, this looks like an Italian scout on the right, meeting a Muslim scout from the United Kingdom on the left, and actually finding out about, what is his faith. And down in the bottom corner, and I'm just going to move my mouse around there, everybody was wearing the t-shirt of "Ask me why I'm covering my head," and another t-shirt had on the back of it, "Ask me why I'm fasting." And so that interaction is very much important as keeping our youth engaged and having them active in learning this opportunity, so then they can become better citizens for tomorrow. And so we did that through currently some of our programs through COVID has included dialogue cafes. And during the special jamboree on the internet, with the help of KAICIID, we were able to bring some of this dialogue conversation online during the event. And we had about 6 or 7 dialogue cafes during this weekend. There's Patrice Baudet from KAICIID, and he was one of our main facilitators in providing an opportunity for people to come to a safe space online through Zoom and actually have an opportunity to learn about dialogue and to learn about how interreligious dialogue and dialogue for peace work not only in scouting but in the world generally. And so then having that interaction with the members, limited number of members in a Zoom room, or breaking out into sessions with facilitators and trainers that would help guide scouts take that opportunity of learning dialogue, but then practically doing that within a safe environment, a supervised environment, and an opportunity to take that as a learning process and a learning opportunity for not only spiritual development for a youth member, but also that important aspect of our scouting non-formal education. That brings us to how we've been able to provide a world program of interreligious and dialogue and interfaith dialogue. And through our partnership with the World Organization of the Scout Movement, with the KAICIID International Dialogue Centre, has been the Dialogue for Peace program. Our relationship with KAICIID started in 2014, 2015. And we both organisations have brought in an educational program that allows for national Scout organisations to incorporate this program, this opportunity, into their youth program and their educational program. And so, the youth members are able to participate and learn about dialogue and receive the badge for it. As you would understand, Scouting is famous for badges, as we wear on our uniform, but at the same time, there is an educational process to that in earning the badge. And so the green badge is your first stage before you can move up to if you're wanting to learn more about Dialogue for Peace and how you can incorporate that in your local communities and share that opportunity with other people, other scouts, other members of the community. You can become a facilitator. And then we want to make sure that we have the right people that is equipped with the opportunity to share that knowledge around the world. And so we have trainers that are able to go out and share that experience and train that experience to our youth members. And I'm also excited that in the second half of this year, we're taking Dialogue for Peace that step further and looking that into interreligious dialogue, and which is what my working group and spiritual development has been tasked on behalf of the World Scout Committee, is looking at how the interreligious dialogue challenge is taking those dialogue principles and specifically targeting scouts who are interested in learning about dialogue and learning about interreligious and interfaith dialogue in order to go out into the community. And so we had a hackathon last week, which is another online program where we got all our Dialogue for Peace specialists from scouts of all over the world. And last week I had about 4 or 5 midnight sessions on Zoom of talking to all these people about how we can build this program that is asking scouts to go from exploring a weekend of dialogue and making that practical and reflecting on that through journaling, and then going out and going service in the community on interfaith and interreligious dialogue with 2 or more interreligious or interfaith groups. And so we're quite excited to be finalising that program and actually releasing that to our national scout organisations so they can incorporate that through their educational program. And so that is a very exciting process that we've been not also working with KAICIID, but also working with our interfaith and interreligious partners within World Scouting, which is very exciting. So I hope that this has given you an understanding of how we as Scouts have been able to move our interreligious and interfaith and our Dialogue for Peace from the physical of our normal scouting program, outdoors with the community, with a group of people, and then moving that online, but also still building peace and that opportunity of still having that connection with the community, but also having that educational opportunity. And we hope that through the social media that we've seen a lot of success stories, and we certainly looking forward to not only pivoting back to scouting back to normal for want of a better term, but also combining the 2 opportunities of our normal scouting program and an online scouting program to actually increase our influence of peace and harmony through into the religious and interfaith dialogue and Dialogue for Peace. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to show you our opportunities in scouting. Look forward to having the conversation with you, and please, I hope you're all staying safe and enjoying the presentation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you for these beautiful insights into the world of the Scout movement. To see those community initiatives going on, Scouts are always there helping, wonderful, and this amazing tool for the spiritual development that you showed us with the compass. And yeah, you wrapped up so beautifully. You took some of the words out that I wrote down, but just like to say, wish you every success with the challenge, with the interreligious dialogue challenge, and we'll be watching that space. But yeah, truly, scouting is more an outdoor activity, and those are really great creative initiatives to keep the momentum going and to face the challenge of the COVID-19 crisis that we have at the moment. And we'll see the results later on and everything. Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'm going to move on to Nyambura with her presentation. Off you go. We're still in time. We're doing well.
Okay. So just a minute. So thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you to the rest of the panelists. I've enjoyed listening to your conversation, and I'm glad that I'll be able to share some of the observations I've made after you've already spoken about the concrete works. And I just take a moment to appreciate all the different participants who've come. I'm seeing a few from the youth networks from all over the world, a few friends of Arigato, and so just thank you for being part of the process. At the end of the day, what the young people and what the people who are supporting those young people are doing, the participants here, they're the ones who will make the difference after the conversation. So I'll take a moment and see if I can share my screen. If I'm not able to, Anya will help me. So be patient with me. Let's do this. Yes? Okay. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. I hope you're good now. Can you all see that? Awesome. So just as I was reflecting on today's conversation, and we as a team of panelists together with KAICIID, we thought of speaking and sharing with you what we think works on the online dialogue space in peace building, because we've noticed that even before the COVID-19 crisis, a lot of people were using online mechanisms, but now during the COVID-19 crisis, it has become the new normal. It has become the necessary tool. So as I was reflecting, I observed that there are 3 simple things that work when it comes to young people having dialogue on the online space.
Nyambura, I'm sorry to
Yes,
interrupt you, but we can't see your screen. We were hoping it was going to pop up as you started, but if you could try again.
No problem. So what we can do so that we save on our time, that Anya will just help me and she'll project it from her.
Okay, wonderful.
And
Thank you, Anya.
I'll just continue. Yes, I'll just continue the conversation. Thank you, everyone. So what I was saying is, and thank you, Elizabeth, for the notice, is that I realized that there are 3 observations I can pick from, and I'm glad that the other panelists spoke on these 3 observations on the online space. And I'd like to share these 3 observations with you. When it comes to youth engaging young people, whether online or offline, the most important thing for us to do as youth serving organizations is to help the youth build a community, so that this community will now be activated to have dialogue with one another, to have dialogue with the outside world, and to take action. And sometimes when we think of community in the online space, we normally think of followers, comments, likes, and shares. But I'd like to challenge you to use the real meaning of community. What is a community? It's people who relate with one another, people who know about each other, people who understand each other, who accept and welcome each other. Community has the common aspects of empathy, kindness, love, so on and so forth. So with that thinking in mind, if that's what we're talking about when we say community, how do we translate that world and make it online? So Anya will show you those 3 things which I think if we do, we're able to build a youth community online. And they're simple. They're very simple, but they work. But just because they're simple doesn't mean they're easy to accomplish. Those 3 things are, if we're able to use our online communication to build a youth community where young people connect with each other. And these connections are such that the young person within that space is able to know that I am understood, I am accepted, my voice counts, my story matters, and more than that, I welcome the other. And then through that connection, they're also able to identify with the larger purpose of peace building and identify with the larger purpose of dialogue, and we're on the right track. So the first thing I noticed was, how can we help young people? How can we empower them to connect through our communication online? The second thing is, how do we build the leadership capacity through our online communication? And within the Arigato space and many of the organizations that have just shared today, we use the term leadership not necessarily to mean a position or being in charge of other people, but rather leadership, we use it to mean having the ability to influence change, having the ability and the courage to take action. So therefore, how do we use the online space to build a youth community that has that ability to influence, that has the courage to influence? Then the third thing we noticed is that if online dialogue is to work, if online peace building amongst youth is to work, then there must be a process where the young people are challenged to take action. So you've brought the young people together, you've connected them, they've built a community that's thriving, a community where people have genuine, authentic relationships, where people are understood and their stories matter. Then this community has had the leadership capacity built over time through a process of empowerment. And then thirdly, now you challenge that youth community towards action through your online mechanisms. Call them to take meaningful steps. So with that three approaches, I'd like to see if I can share some youth serving organizations that have really gotten this right. And Anya will take us to the next slide that shows you one of my favorite bands at the moment and many other people. It's called BTS. And yes, that's what we were talking about, building a community using online communication. So BTS is a Korean band that has gained global popularity over time. And the interesting thing is their music is almost 99% in Korean. But however, people all over the world, from China to Kenya to Philippines, all over, young people like their music. They sing their music. If you've not heard of BTS, just Google on YouTube, they'll show up somehow. They'll just show up. Or ask the teenager in your house, they will show up. The chances are that they know BTS. And why? It's because since their inception, BTS figured out how to use social media to connect with their fans. Their fans gave themselves an identity called ARMY. So through social media, BTS are constantly putting out relatable content. And that's the key. They put up relatable content, not just about their music and music videos, but about their everyday lives. When they're hanging out, when they go for holiday, their thought processes, they go live and speak to their fans. So they've built a culture of relationship and a culture of conversation using social media. And as a result, they have the largest or one of the largest fan bases online. So much so that the Guinness Book of World Records has recognized BTS to have the largest social media engagement, more than President Trump on Twitter, more than Justin Bieber, more than many other people. BTS have nailed and aced the social media game. How? By sharing their lives. So as peace builders, as organizations working with youth, can we find a way to use social media to share our lives as staff, to share how we manage things, to share how we think through peace, and more importantly, to create a safe space where young people can do the same thing, share their lives, a relatable way, and connect. The second organization that has totally aced this game, there are many others, but I'm glad that Ross spoke about the World Organization of Scouts movement. Yay! Or to all the scouts out there. So Anya will show you a slide that highlights a little bit of the World Scouts movement. So we've moved from an organization, BTS, a music group that has figured out how to connect young people, a large fan base online using social media. The World Scouts movement is acing it in the game of building young leaders. It is the primary thing. They talk about engaging citizenry, and Ross, you can tell me if that's correct. The purpose is to build engaged young people, people who are committed and people who are active in their society, in their community. And as Ross has told us, they've been able to figure out now how to combine what they do through their face-to-face activities with a lot of the online work. And he's given us wonderful examples of the same. As I was reading through, I came across an example of a young person in Argentina, a 22-year-old youth who decided that she wants to train young people, but more so, she wants to train older people, elders, parents, so on and so forth, on how to engage in interreligious dialogue. So you see a young person using online mechanisms to reach her generation and the older generation. So that's a good example. The third example I'd like to share with you, and Anya will take us to the next screen, is an organization called DoSomething.org. And this is a youth-led platform, one of the largest online youth-led platforms that is 100% about calling young people to take action. As their name suggests, do something good. That's all that they do. And it's a hybrid in two ways. On the first side, the staff and volunteers of Do Something come up with challenges, they come up with campaigns ranging from climate action to addressing discrimination to talking about gender-based violence. So you have the staff of the organization, for example, that would be our youth serving organizations, coming up with the campaigns, and then inviting all the youth that they can reach through their digital platforms to pitch in. They invite them, come join us, volunteer, donate money, help raise money, learn more about this issue, talk to your government. The second approach they take is they invite youth to put up their own challenges, to put up their own campaigns on their website and on their digital platforms. So for example, you have a young person from Ethiopia coming up with a challenge on how to address hunger in Ethiopia and asking other young people from Peru to help them. So you see a very dynamic peer-to-peer process of challenging each other to action. So those are the three things I've observed, that if we adopt both online and offline, if we're able to empower youth online, we're bringing them together, not just having followers and so, that genuine connection is built when we share our lives, because people connect with people. So as youth-serving organizations, we must find a way to drop some of the walls and share our lives with the young people who we want to bring up, and then create a space where these young people can share their lives with other young people, so that every voice matters, every story matters. Secondly, it's about leadership. All our online communication must have that mindset of we are shaping leaders. So whether we're talking about COVID-19 emergency response, whether we're talking about education, whether we're actually talking about the policies, the idea is we want the young person who is interacting with our online communication to come out of that process thinking like a leader, working like a leader, having that confidence that as a young person, I can influence change. As a young person, I can take action. And the last thing that I've spoken about is now challenging to action. At the end of all this, there must be a systematic and a structured way where we as youth-serving organizations are challenging, using our online communication, challenging youth to take action. And more than that, where young people themselves are challenging their peers to take action. So the last slides that Anya will help me take you through are just photos of some of what we as Arigato have been able to do. So as Arigato International, an organization that brings people together from all walks of life to benefit children, we work with youth and we work with children a lot. More than that, we work with faith leaders. So we decided to observe, after we observed what works for other people, to adapt them to our lifestyle, to adapt them to our online work. And we picked up, I'll give you those three things that we were able to pick up. So in terms of connecting people, we have an East Africa regional youth network for peace. It's called Youth in Action, which is amazing. People are here, they can tell you more. We have a WhatsApp group and a Facebook group where we talk a lot. Every single day, we just find out, how are you doing? How are you coping now with the COVID-19 crisis? Did you apply what we talked about? What activities going on? So it's a space where we're keeping each other accountable. We are sharing what we're learning, and we're inviting other people. For us, WhatsApp works. We combine WhatsApp with Facebook groups. And more than that, we have an Arigato online safe space that's just unique for our members and our volunteers. So maybe you can ask yourself, for my organization, what would work? And then the second thing we do is that we use our faith beliefs, because we're an interfaith organization, to communicate leadership principles. All our communication is based on, as a young person, as a young leader, what can you do? What do you need to know? And what does your faith tell you? How does your faith engage with you? What can you draw from your faith belief or your traditional beliefs? And the last thing as Arigato we've been able to do in terms of challenging to action is come up with online campaigns. There are two examples I've given there: I Lead Peace and End Child Poverty. So I Lead Peace, the concept is around a young person saying, I'm a leader, I can do this, so I lead peace in my community. So those are the three examples. Then the last two slides, and thank you for listening to me, are showing just images of some of the examples. So you see the I Lead Peace campaign there. On the bottom left-hand corner, you see one of our young leaders talking to her peers about ending gender-based violence. On the top left-hand corner, my left-hand corner, you see a young man who's coming up with a thought process of educating people on gender-based violence using posters, and they'll draw these posters, take photos, and take them to schools, and the I Lead Peace hashtag there. Then you have just the last slide. That's one of our online campaigns on a photo contest that we invited people, youth, show us photos of what ending child poverty means to you. And the winner for last year's contest showed us that image, which is a father or a caregiver, a guardian, a religious leader, teaching a young person how to use cameras to tell his stories. a young person from a disadvantaged community. Then the final slide is our contact information. So as I finish, I just want to thank every one of you for being part of this and to reassure the participants that as the panelists, our organizations are ready to work with you. We are willing to share our information. We are willing to learn from each other. Back to you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nyambura. Thank you for that beautiful, insightful presentation, showing us those practical examples of those youth-led organizations, and then showing us how Arigato have been taking that and using it and applying it to your programs, which is one of the essential things of working with youth and encouraging them and building their capacities. I shouldn't really say anything I'm only the moderator, but I had to put that one in. We have 5 minutes. I know that everyone's been very, very busy in the chat except me. Seen it all going on in the corner of my eye. We have 2 open questions from the Q&A. I don't think we've got time for everyone to answer, so you're going to have to work it out between you, which will be interesting as well. And I'd like to start with the first one. And that is a question came in, which is, how effective do you find online space for meaningful dialogue, taking into account that the internet is also a huge barrier in some areas? How do you inspire your creativity in continuing effective dialogue? What are your lessons learned and advice? It's a long one. I give it to the highest bidder. Ross, would you like to respond from a Scout's perspective?
Sure. That's a very interesting question, because I recognise personally, and I think a lot of our Scout leaders recognise personally, that in some areas of the world, access to internet is hard, and access to any educational program is very difficult. And I think that's probably one of the aspects that is sadly being missed out because of COVID, because the only way you can connect with people without that access is that personal. And Mark, in his first presentation, alluded to the fact that with that access issue in Nepal and the schools closing, that the youth that they are undertaking for the education that are now home and may miss out and may not come back ever again, is a very tough assignment to try and sort of bring together, to not have anybody miss out. I think from our perspective, sometimes you just have to go with what you can do, and the majority of us in Scouts have been able to keep up with a connected program with the majority of our members. But I also think that the other opportunities that for youth that don't have the access, it's particularly in those countries where Scouts are actively working in the emergency situation, and so actually are still working with their local communities in order to bring out outreach and care packages and that connection, so people are able to get the emergency access of food and clothing and medicine and the like. And the World Scout Foundation has been undertaking a donation drive in order to assist those as members of Scouts that are undertaking that sort of work. So in missing out on the dialogue and probably some of the education methods from the online work in those countries, I think we've been able to pivot to the work of actually helping in the community and helping in the emergency with local authorities, and that's, so I think we've been able to do a two-way street relatively successfully, and I hope that gives a lot of positive opportunity for youth to be part of peace building throughout the world. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Ross. Would anybody else like to respond to the question? We've just been given we have another 10 minutes actually. I made a mistake. I said we only had 5 and I hurried it along, but if anybody else would like to respond to that question, you're very much welcome to, any of the panelists.
This is Sachi. Just want to build on Ross's excellent answer. I also answered some of that question online itself, but I think it's not just about the Zoom meetings or Google meetings, but if we combine a holistic approach of text messaging, WhatsApp or Facebook, they all together can actually make a difference. So we see this in a couple of places where the people don't have access to the internet, but they might have phones that would have phone credits. And sometimes people are transferring phone credits, for example, to other people who don't have phone credit to call people. So it's not only about having meetings, but it's about how do we address the different forms of vulnerability with the technology that is available to people who are in need, whether it's through phone credits to pay for groceries, because that's another way that is happening in certain parts of Africa, or about creating a phone link for managing mental health issues for young women. And that's another way to manage sexual gender-based violence also. So it's not only about this physical meeting, the wonderful community that Nyambura described can happen online with strangers as well, as long as we are able to understand who those strangers are and be able to map out what needs they might have and engage them at a human-to-human level, and using technology as a way to connect as well. I'll close with this. Even though we may have to have physical distancing, we don't have to be very close to one another to help people out, right? And I think we've seen a number of countries where people are driving by or walking by elderly homes and singing for them. And that's another way to keep uplifting their spirits also. We are seeing around the world how people are appreciating nurses, but it's, we can go one step further with the healthcare professionals and say, recognize all of the essential workers we have. What this pandemic has taught us is that a CEO is not the essential worker. A grocery clerk, a Uber driver who is delivering food is an essential worker. They are saving lives. It's about showcasing all of those heroes and sheroes and recognizing them and making sure we support their well-being just as much as they are risking their lives to support us. I think there are lots of ways to do that. And I think technology could be one way to do it, but the humanness is important to have in there, borrowing Nyambura's excellent community description. Over.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move to the next question, which is coming from a director of a youth-led organization in Ghana. And they have asked if you could share your experience with mentoring and empowering youth to better serve communities and also get listened to more. Maybe Mark or Nyambura would like to respond on that one, so we have a full round here at the end.
So with your permission, I'll just give one approach that I've noticed. You could consider bringing them into the space where the action is happening. In that, if you're empowering a young person to be in the dialogue space, then facilitate, you as a leader, you as the youth serving organization, facilitate their movement, facilitate their presence, and then give them knowledge and skills to be able to speak in that dialogue space. So for example, find a way to get them to speak with your ministers or your members of parliament, with the African Union. How? By teaching them what advocacy is, giving them the necessary resources, and then helping them get there. That's one way to empower. Bring the young people to that space where the action is taking place. Make sure that they're learning from the experienced people. Another way is connect them with someone directly. As a youth organization, you may have access. For example, you will have access to these panelists here who have spoken. So get that young people, or get that young person, in touch with these panelists who are saying, I'm willing to help. A simple email introduction and say, help this young person figure this thing out. So thanks. Mark?
Thank you, Nyambura. In our experience, it's about, I mean, it can be a long and difficult process, but so worthwhile. I mean, first of all, it's about creating the spaces, isn't it, where young people feel confident to kind of develop their skills, test their skills. I mean, in the schools where we work, for example, you know, that culturally young people would not speak up, challenge teachers or challenge parents. So first of all, it's about building the confidence to do that, but obviously doing it in a very culturally sensitive way. So it's not about coming in and saying you should speak up and say what you think, you know, and how we should solve these problems, because that's not going to be well received within the culture. So that, if anything, is just going to cause conflict and problems. So first of all, it's about working with young people to kind of think in, as I said, in a culturally sensitive way about how they might approach and address certain issues. And the way we do that is often through arts. You know, arts creates that safe space where we use a technique called form theatre, for where young people recreate problems in a kind of, you know, dramatic way. So it removes people directly from those situations, and then get a kind of interactive crowd. So it might be some teachers, parents kind of intervene, talk, and you create a dialogue that way. So it's about doing it in a very sensitive, sort of careful way. Otherwise, you know, the kind of worst case scenario is actually you're creating more conflict and problems than you're actually solving. So I think arts, we use, as I say, drama, music, you know, kind of different forms of art to first of all explore these issues with young people, because sometimes they're really difficult issues for them to talk about, and they're not used to being asked, and doing it in that kind of sensitive, supportive way, and then gradually building confidence in order to kind of present those to other stakeholders, as I said, parents, often employers or teachers, in that culturally sensitive, constructive way. So it's not all about, and what we always think about is, nobody wants to hear about problems, do they? Nobody wants to be challenged. Everybody reacts negatively when they're feeling like they're being accused of something, or not doing something well or something right. So it's also a lot of emphasis we place is on coming up with constructive solutions. I mean, it's a bit like, if you, I was talking to someone about this the other day, about influencing policy, for example. It's exactly the same principle at a high level of influence and policy. Policymakers do not want to hear about what they're doing wrong or about problems. What they want to hear is how you're going to help them and how you're going to help them solve a problem. And that's exactly the same, I think, at any level of addressing problems. You know, we work with our young people to say, you know, older people or people in charge do not want to be criticised and have young people saying, you know, you're doing this wrong or whatever. And the same principle applies. Come up with really good creative solutions, positive solutions, be constructive, and people are much more likely to listen to you. And that's when real kind of genuine dialogue starts, because people want to listen then, rather than immediately feel like they're being attacked, go on the defensive and stop listening. So that's the kind of strategies we try and help young people think about and practice and put in place.
Thank you, Mark. That was, thank you. That was really inspiring, and I'm going to take it with me. In fact, the entire meeting that we've had today, the discussion, I'm certainly, for one, I'm going to be going back to the DK. I'm not just making an advert for us, but I'm going to go to that archive and take a look at your presentations again. There's so much to take with it. I'm missing out on the chat that's going on the right hand side of my screen, but I know that it's been a very colorful chat, and people are taking a lot away with them, and truly wonderful. I'd just like to let you go round the round and maybe final couple of words from each of you. So Mark, or we'll go backwards. We'll start with Nyambura, and we'll do the round backwards.
I first want to thank you, Elizabeth, and the KAICIID team for putting this together, and my panelists and participants who've come. Just thank you so much. What we do every day matters to someone.
Thank you. Thank you to you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you to everybody who is tuning into this webinar. It's exciting to work with a group of people, not only in Scouts, but outside of Scouts, and looking at peace and interreligious and interfaith and intercultural dialogue. So it's a fantastic opportunity to be part of the work, not only through Scouts, but through KAICIID. And it's exciting to hear a lot of people share their experiences in order to be inspired and to be community engaged, and that's an important part of dialogue. So I wish everybody, and particularly for all the former Scouts that are also on this panel, because there's quite a few. Mark, we established that just about everybody else is or a former Scout. I hope you may be too, but good luck and good scouting.
Good scouting to you too, Ross. Thanks so much. Saji.
Thank you again for hosting this, and thank you all who are joining from around the world for making time to listen to us and engage in this discussion as well. I think two messages. One, I think I borrow Nyambro saying we are all in this together. We all need each other. And what this pandemic is teaching us is that the most essential people are all of us, not some technology or something else that is fancy. It is all of us. I think the more we connect at our common human level, I think the more we are able to overcome these enormous challenges. But said that, we cannot afford to neglect the voiceless. We cannot afford to neglect the people who have less power than us, less influence than us. And if we are uplifting them, we are uplifting all of us. And I think that's the real power of young people, because the way young people think is more horizontal and more selfless. I think that power that young people have, if we can continue to amplify their work, be able to give them speaking spots more, I think we will be much better off today and tomorrow as we deal with the unfolding crisis that we will come in the next year or so. So I look forward to being part of that movement, and look forward to hearing and working with a lot of the folks who are online, and so thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking too, Saji. Mark, your turn.
I'm afraid I've got to end with an admittance that I was never a Scout. My sister was a Girl Guide. I blame my parents. They deprived me. Maybe it's still not too late for me.
Not too late, Mark. It's really
okay. Excellent. Yeah, well, great pleasure. We've all been doing a lot of these online seminars, and a lot of them are kind of, to be perfectly honest, sat in our offices here quite dry and boring, but this was of genuinely great interest. I didn't realise what great work the Scouts were doing, and their kind of interfaith dialogue programme. Obviously, I know Searching Common Ground and Arigato, but it's great to hear about what excellent work's going on all over the world. I mean, this is what inspires us in this area, isn't it? It's the people for me. This is why I love this area of work, meeting people. Invariably, we're inspired by the excellent work that people are doing all over the world. So, yeah, thank you very much. A couple of people have asked me to share my email. Please get in touch with me. Always, it's always a pleasure to hear from people all over the world about what excellent work they're doing. And thank you again to KAICIID for organising this. So thank you, Liz and Anya.
Yep, thank you, Mark. Yes, thank you, Anya. Anya Piskor is the brainchild of these webinars. She puts it all together. She gets us all together. She rattles and shakes. So thank you very much, Anya, for making it possible to have us all here. Thank you, panelists. Thank you to the participants for coming. If anyone, for some reason, can't find the email address or whatever it is you would like in follow-up from this webinar, do get in touch with us at the Dialogue Knowledge Hub at KAICIID. We can then set up that connection if you didn't manage to pick it up from the chat. Okay, so thank you very much. Everyone have a great day. See you all soon, I hope. Bye.